Crowds put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now for another loaded show as we get you set for the 25-26 college basketball season. 4 weeks today, we will have college basketball. Not that anybody is counting. Want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also, want you to subscribe, want you to get into the chat. Want to hear from you later in the show. As always, we will have plenty of live interaction for you, the college basketball fan, because that is who I serve 365 days out of the year. Now, I was on the road last week going up and down the Eastern Seaboard, made a stop at Radford, a team that I think could very well represent the Big South in the 2026 NCAA Tournament. A loaded mid-major roster there in year one under Zach Chu. Also saw Virginia Tech and Virginia, two teams in the ACC that should be vastly improved from a year ago. I'll get to those two squads later in this show with nuggets on both of them. Meanwhile, as I continued up I-95, I stopped in the city of Richmond, visited with Chris Mooney, visited with Phil Martelli Jr. at VCU. Time and time again, I am blown away at how much better VCU's facilities are than many power conference programs. Rams again look like a contender at the top of the Atlantic 10. Phil Martelli has a team again that should be having its sights set on an Atlantic 10 championship. And then I wrapped up my week around the Washington, D.C. area, visited with Tony Skinn at George Mason and Chris Caputo at GW respectively, and then took in Georgetown practice under Ed Cooley, who's in his third year right now as head coach of the Hoyas. I'm going to get to that stuff as well later in the show. But first, let's get to three big things. And the first big thing right now that we want to tackle was a report last week by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, where he did a story that the NCAA tournament is close to finalizing an agreement to expand to 76 teams. Now, in this story, we had the makeup of what the NCAA tournament would look like if it indeed expanded to 76 teams, which obviously would start most likely during the 26-27 season. Under this makeup, there would be 12 games in total on Tuesday and Wednesday. There would be 3 games a day in Dayton on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then 3 games at a site that is to be determined, but likely to be in the western part of the United States. There would be 12 games, there would be the 12 lowest automatic qualifiers involved in these games, and also the 12 worst at-large teams, the lowest ranked at-large teams according to the selection committee. So instead of having the first 4, which I've been fortunate enough to work on the last couple of years in Dayton, where you have 2 games on Tuesday and 2 games on Wednesday, we would then have 3 games in Dayton on Tuesday, 3 games in Dayton on Wednesday, and then 3 games on Tuesday at a Western focus site, and then 3 games on Wednesday at a Western focus site. So you would essentially then be replicating a similar feel on Tuesday and Wednesday as we've seen during the NCAA tournament on Thursday and Friday. And I just want to get, again, all the logistics to you before we start talking about our feelings on all of this stuff. So again, the 12 lowest automatic qualifiers and the 12 lowest ranked teams, according to the selection committee from an at-large perspective, would be playing then on Tuesday and Wednesday if the tournament does expand to 76 teams. And that's obviously, again, a story from Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger. So as I digested this story last week and I was in transit, I was on the Acela going from D.C. to New York with so many thoughts. I had wrapped up Georgetown practice, and I was just alone with my thoughts. So I then went and I started to look at what the net rankings were on Selection Sunday. Now, the net rankings, again, do not identify everything that the selection committee uses on Selection Sunday to fill out the bracket, but it's a pretty good gauge around the ballpark of teams that you're going to have. So if last season we saw 76 teams in the NCAA tournament instead of the 68 that played in the event. These are the additional teams that would have played in March Madness last season: Ohio State, Boise State, SMU, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Northwestern, Indiana, and Villanova. And these programs, again, based according to the net, would have been the first four out. Santa Clara, who lost to a Pepperdine team that was nearly 10 games under 500 at the end of the season in the West Coast Conference Tournament. Nebraska, a team that missed the Big Ten tournament. That's right. The Huskers missed the Big Ten tournament last year. But under this criteria, if we had 76 teams in the NCAA tournament last March, Nebraska would have been the second team out based on the net. Pittsburgh, a team that finished 17-16 overall. And then UC Irvine out of the Big West, a team that on Selection Sunday had 27 wins, but 23 of those wins were in quad 3 and 4. That is what you're looking at. Again, if the NCAA tournament expands to 76 teams, and this would be the first four out last season based on the net rankings on Selection Sunday. A first four out of Santa Clara, Nebraska, Pitt, and UC Irvine. And I want to say this again. Santa Clara would have been the first team out after losing to a Pepperdine team in the West Coast Conference Tournament that was nearly 10 games under 500 at the end of the season. Nebraska, a team that did not make the 15-team Big Ten tournament, would have been the second team out. Pitt would have been your third team out at 17-16, and UC Irvine would have been the fourth team out. 23 quad 3 and 4 wins in 27 victories on Selection Sunday. Now, on top of that, we got to go deeper. We got to go deeper beyond the idea that if you go to 76, participation trophies are going to be something that are handed out like seedless watermelon on a 4th of July party. We have heard so much about access to the tournament. The tournament access for the lower seeded automatic qualifiers is going to be swatted away like it's one of the elite shot blockers of all time. Because under this new alignment, which again we saw, if it comes to fruition, the following mid-major teams would have played on Tuesday and Wednesday under this new outline and not played on Thursday and Friday. UNC Wilmington, Montana, Robert Morris, who gave Alabama everything it wanted in the round of 64. I was fortunate enough to be on that call in Cleveland with Spiro Ditas and Jim Spinarkle. Wofford, Omaha, Bryant, Norfolk State, SIU Edwardsville, Alabama, St. Francis, American, and Mount St. Mary's. The last four teams obviously played in the first four in Dayton. But the idea that this is going to be better for mid-majors is one of the biggest farces I've heard in nearly 20 years on this beat, because it's not. This is going to be all about power conference representation. And if you don't believe that, if you are not believing that with your heart and soul each and every night when your head hits the pillow, then I got some swampland to tell you to sell you in Florida. I'm sorry, I speak for a living, but I'm fumbling my words because I'm so worked up over this topic. I have said ad nauseum that if I was going to tweak something with the NCAA tournament, it would be that the last 8 at-large teams would play in the first 4 in Dayton on Tuesday, Wednesday, and all automatic qualifiers then get the experience to go and play and experience Thursday and Friday of the NCAA tournament. I've said that for a couple of years right now. And this new model would do the opposite. We would have 12 teams from the automatic qualifier perspective, the lowest seeded 12 automatic qualifiers going to play on Tuesday and Wednesday. All AQs, in my opinion, should be playing on Thursday and Friday. You've earned that right if you've won a conference tournament. But nobody cares about that right now. That's not the intent. And I came to this realization when I was on that Acela last week, and it hit me. The NCAA tournament isn't just on the verge of expanding. The NCAA tournament experience for everybody is about to drastically change moving forward. And what we're going to see now is a completely different experience. Now, will there be more basketball on Tuesday and Wednesday? Sure. That doesn't mean that it's better. President Kennedy said, and remember, I'm a firm believer, not to discuss three things, okay, socially: politics, religion, and at-large resumes to bubble teams during the first 2 weeks of March. But this quote makes sense. John F. Kennedy once said that change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or the present are most certain to miss the future. He was right. Expansion for the NCAA tournament, as it has right now for a couple of months, feels like an inevitability. But we don't have to like it. We don't have to refuse to acknowledge what's going to happen. There are going to be some really mediocre teams in the NCAA tournament if indeed this model comes to fruition and it goes to 76 teams. And under the list of teams that I gave you, the additional 8 teams that I gave you, if the field was expanded to 76 last year, if that happened, there would have been 4 power conference teams with winning percentages of 55.9% or lower in the field. That means we're taking teams with record, for argument's sake, from a math perspective, with about a 5-4 record. I quote Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own. It's supposed to be hard. The hard is what makes it great. And that is what, again, is what makes college basketball's postseason the greatest tournament in sports, because it's on the heels of what I believe is compelling theater from about January 1st to Selection Sunday. Because the thing that really drags people in from the periphery is something that is really part of the vernacular of our country during February and the first 2 weeks of March, and that's the bubble. Every game matters in college basketball. You heard Dan Hurley on this podcast last week. UConn last year blew games against Colorado and Seton Hall. Maybe if it doesn't lose those games, it's a 6 seed instead of an 8 seed on Selection Sunday. And if you expand to 76, if you do that, if you rupture the greatest postseason tournament that we have in sports, you are going to lose the compelling nature of the regular season, especially during those final couple of weeks in February and early March, where every game for those teams on the bubble feels like life and death. And you're going to take away a lot of the drama, a lot of the theater that exists during championship week. And I have to laugh. I have to laugh and I have to chuckle, because I am seeing more and more mid-major commissioners come out and use the platform they have at their media days to talk about how they're pro NCAA tournament expansion. Really? That's what you're going to do? Well, I'm really pro for my paychecks moving forward, that I'm only going to get taxed 5% for the rest of my life. There is no way to the NCAA tournament right now if you are in a mid-major league other than winning your conference tournament. And I'll give you a couple of examples. There are outliers outside the Power Five. Sure. The Mountain West has done incredible things the last couple of years. Incredible. 4 bids last season, a record 6 in 2024, 4 bids the year before that. But the Mountain West is going to break up, and we are going to see the new Pac-12 come to fruition. So this rendition of the Mountain West with San Diego State, Boise State, Utah State, New Mexico, UNLV, this is the last dance for that league. And what's going to happen to the West Coast Conference next year? Gonzaga is gone. Gonzaga is finished in the West Coast Conference. It's going to go to the new Pac-12, where it will hook up with some of those schools that I mentioned: San Diego State, Boise State, Colorado State, and Utah State. Now, with that said, Are there going to be outliers if we go to 76 teams from non-power conferences? Sure. But the facts are the facts. I read you, again, according to the net, if we were to go with the eight highest rated net teams on Selection Sunday, who would have been in the NCAA tournament if we had a 76-team tournament, you would have Ohio State, Boise State, SMU, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Northwestern, Indiana, and Villanova. There is one non-power conference team in that crop of 8. One. And there will be an outlier from time to time. Will there be an opportunity for leagues who do not usually have multiple bids to get teams in the NCAA tournament? Sure. Do I think the Mountain West could potentially get multiple bids on occasion? Sure, that's an attainable goal. Could an Atlantic 10 team that has a really, really good non-conference schedule with opportunities with quad 1 and 2 games like VCU and Dayton have an opportunity to move the needle and maybe once every blue moon, every other year, every third year, get an extra team in the NCAA tournament? Sure, that's possible. But I'm telling you, if you don't think that expansion is about getting more power conference teams into the field, I've got some swampland to sell you in Florida. And what we're seeing again is a changing of the guard, because the NCAA tournament experience that you love, that I love, is on the brink right now. And it's going to change for eternity. And the older I get, I'm 42. I've been doing this now 20 years. 20 years, okay? This is my 17th season that I'm going to be covering college basketball for CBS. I came in 2010. The only constant is change. That is the only thing that's guaranteed. But the thing that we love, this NCAA tournament, could be entering for the final time a bracket constructed the way it should be constructed. Now, I would tweak what I've referenced for years. Move all AQs to Thursday, Friday, and play the last 8 at-large teams in Dayton. But it doesn't sound like they're listening to me. It sounds like there wants to be this creation of now on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to have games all day, just like Thursday and Friday. We're going to take the last 12 at-large teams. They're going to play them. You're going to take the lowest seeded automatic qualifiers. You're going to play them. We're going to have fewer AQs advanced to Thursday and Friday. And what we're going to have is really juice taken out of college basketball's regular season. And again, I'm going to end on this before we transition. I quote Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own. When Gina Davis was leaving with Bill Pullman and they were driving back to Oregon because they wanted to start a family, and she left her team as they were getting ready for the World Series. And she said, it just got too hard. And Tom Hanks looks in the camera and says, it's supposed to be hard. The hard is what makes it great. The same should be said about making the NCAA tournament. This is not a participation trophy. It is the greatest event we have in sports. And now, all the coaches, all the people who have been pro-expansion, more kids deserve the opportunity to experience the postseason. This much I'll tell you. All those coaches that have been clamoring for years for more bids, you better make this NCAA tournament. Because if you don't make a 76-team NCAA tournament, the level of job security that these coaches are going to have who miss the bracket if there's 76 is going to go down, down, down. In fact, the pressure to make the NCAA tournament for head coaches will go up exponentially if this thing shifts to 76 teams. Want to hear from you. Want to get your thoughts in the chat. I'm going to get to your thoughts in a second, but I also want to hit some other big things that came to the forefront last week. Auburn is in position to be in position in year one under Stephen Pearl. Now, as we've covered the last couple of weeks, Stephen Pearl, the son of Bruce Pearl, the top assistant at Auburn a couple of weeks ago, was named the full-time head coach, got a 5-year deal to be the head coach of the Tigers. He's been instrumental in this program's rise under Bruce Pearl. And there was some really, really big news that came down last week when Stephen Pearl was able to retain Tahad Pettiford, a preseason All-American. Keyshawn Hall, a transfer from UCF who led the Big 12 in scoring last season. And everybody else on the Tigers roster. When there is a coaching change, there is a 30-day window to enter the transfer portal. Auburn got through that. And now I think you look at Auburn, even though it's being coached by a first-time head coach, even though it's obviously going to go through a brutal non-conference schedule, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, Auburn now has the foundation in place to be an NCAA tournament team in year one under Stephen Pearl. Pettiford's usage is going to go up exponentially. He averaged over 15 points per game last year when Auburn played 5 NCAA tournament games and advanced to the Final Four for the second time in program history. Keyshawn Hall is one of the great individual scorers there is in the sport. And you also have 2 other players, in my opinion, Kevin Overton, transfer from Texas Tech, and Keyshawn Murphy, a transfer from Mississippi State, who played key roles on teams that made the NCAA tournament last year. Kevin Overton was a part of a team that went to the Elite Eight. But now, things get a little bit real. And what I mean by that is Stephen Pearl has a roster in place to get to the NCAA tournament. And that's a quest, obviously, that's going to continue here for the next several months. But before he can get to the SEC, before he can get to a conference that put 14 teams, which is an NCAA record, in the NCAA tournament last year and should challenge for double-digit bids this year, Stephen Pearl is going to undertake the most difficult non-conference schedule in the history of college basketball for a first-time head coach. And if you don't agree with that statement, give me a first-time head coach, not a first-time power conference head coach, a first-time head coach that is going to have a slate like this in November and December. Kelvin Sampson in Houston and Birmingham. I've got them number 2 in the Rothstein 45. You go to the Players era in Las Vegas. Oregon and Michigan are guaranteed, plus a third game that's to be determined. Michigan, a top 10 team in my Rothstein 45 rankings. Oregon, a top 25 team. NC State and Will Wade in the ACC SEC Challenge. Then you go to Tucson. You're at Arizona. Then you go to Gainbridge Fieldhouse to play Purdue, the number 1 team in the country, the number 1 team I have and so many others have, in December. This is the craziest non-conference schedule I have ever seen for a first-time head coach. A first-time head coach that puts a schedule like this together is also the kind of person who tries to, break back into Alcatraz after you escape. I mean, this is crazy stuff right here. Houston, Oregon, Michigan, 1 game in the Players era that's TBD. Will Wade and company come into the jungle in the ACC SEC Challenge at Arizona, Purdue, and Indianapolis at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. If you're an Auburn fan, that's 7 big-time games. You got to find a way to get 2 or 3. I don't know how, but you got to find a way to get 2 or 3. Congrats to Stephen Pearl, a promising young coach, a guy that was an integral part of Auburn's success under his father, Bruce Pearl, and was a part of 2 staffs that went to the Final Four. But he has got some November and December cut out for him. The third big thing, Hoya Paranoia. Now, I saw a number of schools last week when I was on the road. The most physically imposing team I saw unequivocally was the Georgetown Hoyas. Now, as I thought, and then I thought some more, and you think about storylines in the Big East this season, I think more and more about how there are 2 teams that are above the rest significantly, and we've covered that on this show. It's St. John's and it's UConn. And then you have to give the benefit of the doubt to Creighton, even though Creighton lost Ryan Kalkbrenner and Stephen Ashworth. Greg McDermott's one of the best coaches in the sport. And you have to give the benefit of the doubt to Marquette, even though the Golden Eagles lost Cam Jones, Stevie Mitchell, and David Joplin. But in that tier, after St. John's and UConn, and you guys know I love Providence. I saw them practice. Kim English has done a great job revamping that perimeter. I think Georgetown's in play for that group of teams that could be vying for the 3rd or 4th spot in the Big East. This is a really, really gifted defensive roster. Georgetown has the potential to not be a good, but be a great defensive team in 25-26. The question is, can this team score? The question is, can this team get 65 points per game? Because if Ed Cooley can get to that level, Georgetown's going to win a lot of games. The makeup of this team, physically, lengthwise, getting in passing lanes, getting offensive rebounds, reminded me a lot of some of the teams that Mick Cronin had when he was at Cincinnati. Not the most aesthetically pleasing basketball, but basketball that could potentially win a lot of games in what I think is going to be a Big East conference that's in transition. You got two teams at the top. You got St. John's and UConn, two teams that are vying for a national championship. And then that next tier, you have a revamped Creighton team. You've got a revamped Marquette team. Providence is improved, and you got Georgetown. The Hoyas are in that tier. Arizona transfer KJ Lewis shined in the practice. Looked like he has a lot more offense than he showed during the first couple of years of his college career. Ed Cooley told me he loves Maryland transfer Deshaun Harris-Smith, a potential glue guy to monitor in the Big East and beyond. The question is, can Georgetown score? The question is, can they get to 65, 66 points per game? If that happens, Georgetown is going to be in play to be the third or fourth team from the Big East, in my opinion, in the conference standings. That seems like an attainable goal, and Georgetown will have an opportunity to move the needle early in the season, November 7th in College Park, Georgetown, Maryland, a great, great rivalry game in that area of the country. Want to hear from you because you are who I serve 365 days a year, 52 weeks of the year, 12 months a year. I want you to get in the chat. I want you to subscribe because there are a lot of things to get to. Anything that's on your mind, we will cover. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. Want to get your thoughts in the chat on everything we've covered. We've talked NCAA tournament expansion. We've talked a little Auburn. We've talked a little bit of Georgetown. Uptown Dre wants to know, John, how was Hoya's practice, comrade? Well, I just went into that. I think Georgetown's got a chance here to really turn a corner under Ed Cooley. Now, this team does not have a focal point like it had last season with Thomas Sorber. Obviously, he was a first-round pick, but I look at the lineup for Georgetown. Malik Mack started his career at Harvard, is back for another tour of duty for Georgetown. He's a veteran point guard. I talked about Arizona transfer KJ Lewis at the 2. Deshaun Harris-Smith is capable at the 3. The 4-man looks like a battle between a number of players. Caleb Williams would be my bet for that right now because he's a veteran. Up front, you have Vinsu Achukwu, a transfer from St. John's. I think there's depth for Georgetown. I think there's different options that, Ed Cooley can use. Langston Love, a transfer from Baylor, was out of the lineup with a minor injury. He should be back, but he's a capable player. I think Georgetown, again, has a chance to be a sneaky team in the Big East. Joel Spalding says, nothing could be worse than expanding the field. Horrible idea on every level. Joel, I agree with you. And I've been saying this ad nauseum on multiple platforms for a long time. And I said I'm going to go with another movie reference. In The Lost World, 1997, the sequel to Jurassic Park, Jeff Goldblum said, taking dinosaurs off this island would be the worst idea in the long, sad history of bad ideas. Expanding the NCAA tournament may usurp that. But unfortunately, the way things are going, it feels like now this is inevitable, as much as it pains me to say that, because it's real clear there is one motive and one motive only: to get more power conference team into the NCAA tournament. And for the mid-major commissioners out there that think that expansion is going to benefit them, you are surely mistaken. Because that report, again, from Ross Dellinger last week, the thing that really stood out to me, now you are taking more AQs that are the lowest seeded AQs in the bracket and moving them to Tuesday, Wednesday. And that's where the whole experience is going to change. And what I mean by that is if we're going now to have 12 games and 24 teams playing on Tuesday and Wednesday, that means you are going to have 12 AQs playing each other who are the lowest seeded mid-majors in the field. 6 of them are going to be gone by Thursday morning when the round of 64 kicks off. Let's keep scrolling right now. Ashley Quinlan wants to know, John, what is the ceiling for Creighton this season? Well, look, Ashley, the one thing that we've learned is that Greg McDermott is always going to put a good unit on the floor. There are high hopes for a pair of Iowa transfers, Josh Dix, Owen Freeman, who's been out of the lineup he's been out of practice with a lingering knee injury. Greg McDermott told me last week he's still a couple of weeks away. Jackson McAndrew and Isaac Trout are guys who are back up front. There's also some other ancillary transfers, Blake Harper from Howard. I mean, Creighton, to me, should be viewed comfortably as the third best team in the Big East behind St. John's and UConn. Cameron McCaffrey wants to know, John, how many wins do you think Georgetown needs to get in order to make the tournament? Well, this is what I'll say right now, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Those teams at the bottom of the Big East, Seton Hall, Xavier potentially, maybe Butler, maybe DePaul, although I think DePaul is going to be better in year 2 under Chris Holtman. And I actually think this is the type of year where Chris Holtman at DePaul could make a push towards the 8-9 spot in the conference. If those teams bottom out at the bottom of the Big East standings, the double round robin is going to hurt the Big East opportunity to get more teams in the NCAA tournament, because now you are playing teams with those low net numbers multiple times in the regular season, which means there are multiple opportunities to take maybe a quad 3 and 4 loss. So if you're Ed Cooley in Georgetown, this is what I look at. You've got the Maryland game week 1. You've got Clemson in Washington, D.C., who I think is going to take a big step back after what it lost last year, losing Chase Hunter and Ian Shefflin. Georgetown is also going to be at North Carolina in the start of a big home and home. And Georgetown is also going to have 2 opportunities in the ESPN Events Invitational in Orlando over Thanksgiving week. You open with Dayton, and then you're going to get a crack at either BYU or Miami. Georgetown's got to win the Clemson game to make a statement at home, and Georgetown's got to win the Dayton game to potentially get a crack at BYU. And if not BYU, if Miami beats BYU, you're going to get a crack at Miami. But those are status games. Those are opportunities for me, for Ed Cooley to prove that he has turned a corner in year 3. No NCAA tournaments yet for Georgetown. In fact, Georgetown has not been an at-large team to the NCAA tournament since 2015 under John Thompson III. That was the last time Georgetown was an at-large team to the NCAA tournament. Patrick Ewing went to the NCAA tournament once in 2021. He won the Big East tournament in COVID and obviously went to the NCAA tournament where he lost to Colorado. Georgetown was last in at-large team in 2015. And here is an amazing, amazing thing. Georgetown has not made the second weekend of the NCAA tournament since it went to the Final Four 18 and a half years ago in 2007. John Thompson III kept Georgetown, among the top programs in the nation when he was there for a lot of years. But there were a lot of tough losses in the NCAA tournament. You're a 2 seed in 2008. You lose to Steph Curry and Davidson. You are a single-digit seed again, a 3 seed in 2010. You lose to John Gross and Ohio. 2011, you're a high seed in the NCAA tournament. You lose to Shaka Smart and VCU. 2012, you're a 3 seed. You lose to Mark Gottfried and NC State. 2013, you win the Big East regular season title. The old Big East with Otto Porter. You lose to Andy Enfield and Florida Gulf Coast. Georgetown has not been an at-large team to the NCAA tournament since 2015, and Georgetown has not been to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament since it played in the Final Four with my friend Roy Hibbert anchoring the middle. We'll put a bow on this one when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons. It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on Apple Podcasts. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Let's wrap this with 3 good nuggets. Number 1, Virginia Tech as a potential star in Neoklis Avdalas. Access leads to discovery, and making the trip to Blacksburg last week, I knew there were high hopes for Neoklis Avdalas. I did not think I would see what my eyes saw. Now, he was limited in practice due to a small injury, but watching this guy do individual instruction before practice, watching him shoot the basketball, looking at his overall size, I think there is a real possibility that Neoklis Avdalas will do this season for Virginia Tech what Yegor Demon did for BYU last year, except Avdalas has the potential to be a much better shooter than Demon was. This guy's an elite passer. He's got great size at 6'9", and he is another example of these European prospects that can now come to college basketball instead of playing professionally, because finally we have NIL to pay these players. Virginia Tech was an interesting team. Mike Young got a really good piece in West Virginia transfer Imani Hansberry, who looks to be in great shape. Wouldn't shock me if the Hokies are a bubble team in 25-26. Nugget number 2, Oregon suffered a blow. Oregon announced last week that Jackson Shelstad is out 4 to 6 weeks with a broken hand. I look at Oregon now, and I see a roster and a team that has a great coach in Dana Altman, a great point guard in Shelstad, and an all-Big Ten big in Nate Biddle. I like Kwame Evans, but he's not quite on that level yet. But Oregon is not going to be able to beat the better teams on its schedule without Jackson Shelstad at point guard. The Ducks open on November 3rd against Hawaii, play Rice on the 7th and South Dakota State on the 12th. And then there's a game against Oregon State on November 17th. Jackson Shelstad has to be back, in my opinion, hopefully by that date, so that Oregon can get him for the Players Era Tournament Thanksgiving week in Las Vegas. Oregon in that tournament will play Auburn and San Diego State before a third opponent that is TBD. Nugget number 3, Virginia is going to have a makeover under Ryan Odom, and this is fascinating to me. Virginia for years under Tony Bennett became one of the best programs in the country by playing slow, playing methodical, taking the air out of the ball, and the Cavaliers are going to play completely different under Ryan Odom, who was the head coach in 2018 when UMBC pulled off that massive upset, the 20-point win, the first time ever in history that a team who was a 16 seed beat a 1 seed. I like the positional size at Virginia. I think it's going to look a lot different. Dallin Hall's a really good player from BYU, the transfer. I think Virginia could start 5 players, 6'4" or bigger. There's good shooting on the wing. Malik Thomas from San Francisco led the WCC in scoring last year. There's enough for Virginia to be a bubble team. And I'm looking at Virginia Tech and I'm looking at Virginia, 2 teams I saw in person last week. And I think those teams will be with the Miamis and the NC States and maybe even the North Carolinas in that ACC mix in what everybody hopes is a revamped year for the conference. ACC has to get 6 teams in 2026 to prove that the league is turning a corner back to respectability. 18 teams in the league, so that's a third of the conference. Only 4 bids for the ACC last year. I'm on the road again this week. I'll be at NC State and Duke on Tuesday. Going to hang out at North Carolina Wednesday, so I'll spend some time in the Triangle. I'm going to see Takeo Siddle's team at UNC Wilmington on Thursday. Then I'm back up to New York on Friday to see Red Autry and the Syracuse Orange. Another fun week on the road, another fun afternoon with you. We are going to have more content for college basketball than you can possibly devour. Think of Inside College Basketball Now as your weekly Thanksgiving dinner. And it's going to be nonstop from now until the end of the Final Four in 2026 and beyond. Want to remind you once again to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this was another edition of Inside College Basketball Now.